Now we're on Daf Pei Zayin Amid Beis, and Rabbi Yochanan is quoting a Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, "Shekiblu psulim v'zarku es damo." Now, the vav of v'zarku is going to be the problem here between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We don't know exactly how to interpret the letter vav, but the way Rabbi Yochanan interpreted the vav is and, not or, but and. So it means, according to Rabbi Yochanan, someone who was posel was makabel the dam, and he was zorik the dam. That's like two strikes against you. My love, shekiblu psul v'zarku psulim. Doesn't the vav indicate that both the kabbalas adam and the zrikas adam was done by a posel? Posel meaning, let's say, a zar or a tameh or whatever. And just one second. Oh, so now if you read the vav as an and, Rabbi Yochanan is medayik that if, let's say, somebody who's posel did one of the two, either the Kabbalah and the Zrika was done by a kosher, or the reverse, the Kabbalah was done by a kosher and the Zrika was done by a posel, then we're allowed to place it on the Mizbeach. L'chatchila. Now again, the fact that either the Kabbalah or the Zrika was done by a posel is enough to posel the carbon. That's not a question. But the Kabbalas Hadam was done in a mizrak, meaning in a receptacle which had the status of a klishares, and the klishares now is makadesh, the contents of the klishares, in this case the carbon that's posel, such that now through that kiddush of the klishares you're allowed l'chatchila to put it on the mizbeach. So we see clearly, says Rabbi Yochanan to Reish Lakish in response to his question, that the halach of kiddush here through klisharis in a carbon that's posel goes as far as to allow me l'chatchila to burn the avarim on the mizbech. Lo, Reish Lakish says that's no proof. Shekibla psulim inami shezarko psulim. We read the vav as either or. So it means that there was no double avoda, a double avoda of a posel, meaning both the Kabbalah and the Zrika, but rather one of the other. Now, if we apply the principle of im alu lo yerdu, im alu means only post facto, only b'di'evet if it was put on top of the mizbech, then you burn it, but you don't put it l'chatchila. So therefore, says Reish Lakish, the Mishnah might be implying with the word inami, if you read ve as inami, that if, let's say, someone who was posel was makabel the dam, or someone who was posel was zorik the dam, in either of those cases, then the carbon is posel and im alu lo yeretu, but it doesn't mean that you're allowed to put it there l'chatchila. Okay, now we start a new sugya. And the question is, the airspace on top of the mizbeach, does it have the same status as the mizbeach, or it's only if it's on the floor of the mizbeach? And this can be relevant also to the kevesh, because apparently there was airspace separating the kevesh from the mizbeach itself. So let's say if you took something of a varim for aktora from the kevesh and you threw it onto the mizbeach, then it goes through the avir of the mizbeach that separates the kevesh from the mizbeach. So the Gemara inquires the following: Avir Mizbeach Kimizbeach Domi Olo. Now we said that if it's on the Mizbeach, then Lo Yerdu. Then we burn it, even though it's disqualified, it's possible, and we don't take it down. What happens if it was on the airspace? Like, for example, we're going to see in the case of Malika that the oaf itself was in the air, suspended in the hands of the Kohen, in the airspace of the Mizbeach. Does the Mizbeach have an extension that incorporates the airspace above it as part of the Mizbeach, such that we apply the principle of Lo Yerdu, and we burn it on the Mizbeach? Tashma, I'll answer your question from the Mishnah that we had a little bit earlier in this parak. Kishem Shem Mizbeach Makadesh Kach Kevish Mizkadesh. Now, Kevish is Makadesh means that Lo Yerdu means we burn it even though it's possible. So he threw a varim that belonged to a carbon puzzle over the airspace from the kevish to the mizbeach, because the airspace separates the kevish from the mizbeach. Iyamrit avir mizbeach lav ki mizbeach domi avir kevish nami lav ki kevish domi heichi masik le mi kevish le mizbeach. When you have a carbon that's puzzle and you throw it from the kevish onto the mizbeach, then if I assume that Avir HaMizbeach, because as we said before, there's a gap that separates the Kevish from the Mizbeach, if Avir HaMizbeach Lav K'Mizbeach Domi is Havi LeYorot, then in effect he took it off the Mizbeach. So how can you then tell me that you put it onto the Mizbeach? Im Olu Lo Yerdu, that's only Im Olu. But if it was off the Mizbeach, you don't put it back on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara says the Nugidle. Somehow the Kohen drags the avarim from the kevesh to the mizbeach. Someone says, I don't get it. What did you gain by that? For aver yesh ben kevesh mizbeach. Very good, you dragged it. So it never ended in the airspace, but it doesn't matter. There is an airspace that separates the kevesh from the mizbeach. So even when you drag it, part of the avarim are in that airspace, and therefore, if Aver Mizbeach Lav Kimizbeach, then it's off the Mizbeach. How can you put it back on the Mizbeach? And the Gemara answers, Rubo lekevesh kekevesh, Rubo lemizbeach kimizbeach. That there's a loch of rov. So somehow, if he drags it, then only part of the limbs are in that airspace. But most of the limb, that's called rov, is not in the airspace, because the airspace is very narrow and he drags it very quickly, such that only part of the limbs, a minority part of the limbs, is in the airspace. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, but what are you going to do with the suffix of Rami Bar Chama? Tivshot miha hadaboy Rami Bar Chama. Yesh chibra li olim ola. Rami Bar Chama vacillated over the question of rov. He wasn't absolutely sure that the rov would have an impact on the miut, or the minority. And that's called olo. Yesh chibra li olim means that anything that's attached to the carbon ola, even though, let's say, it was not on the Mizbeach, is considered as if it was on the Mizbeach because it's a miut, and that's called Yesh Chibur Liolim. But Rabbi Bar Chama had another tzad, and he vacillated that maybe low, maybe there's no Chibur, and therefore that which is, although it's attached, but nevertheless it's not considered as if it's on the Mizbeach. Tivshot Yesh Chibur, the Gemara answers, Holo Kasha v'Tivshot. Ein ochinami. We have an answer to Rami Bar Chama's question, that there is chibur, and therefore, even though part of the korban went into the airspace between the kevesh and the mizbech, and the airspace is considered as if it's not on the Mizbeach, but nevertheless it's chibur, it's connected to the majority, which was not in the airspace, and therefore it's considered that it's on the Mizbeach. The Kevesh is Makadesh, just like the Mizbeach is Makadesh. Maskif lo Rabba Barachana. Why do you have such a suffix? How can you possibly maintain that side, that possible ruling that the Aver of the Mizbeach has the same status as the Mizbeach is Olas Ha'of the Posla b'machshava Eicha Mishkachas. In the case of Olas Ha'of, where we'll see that the Malika is done in the Avir, and if the Kohen at the time of the Malika had a machshava of Chutz Lizmano, that let's say the oaf would be eaten. No. It can't be eaten because it's an ola. Just 1 second. What would be the machshavas pigul here? That would be burnt chutz lizmano. And now we're telling you that the oaf has the status of pigul because any machshav of chutz lizmano is mafagel the korban and generates, by the way, an isakaris if you eat it. Hakoltum is be'ah. I don't get it. The halacha is im olu lo yerdu, and now the malika is done in the avir of the mizbeach. So if it's in the avir of the mizbeach, that it's olu and lo yerdu, we burn it. So even if he had a machshava to burn it chutz lizmano, that machshava is totally irrelevant. It doesn't register at all. It's meaningless because the Torah says burn it. It's already on the mizbeach because avir mizbeach ki mizbeach dom. And the Gemara rejects it. Maskif lo Rav Shimi bar Ashi. That's not a proof at all. Alam Allah. Why are you telling me that it's impossible to have a machshavas pigul on an olas ha'of based on the fact that based on the premise that avir mizbeach mizbeach dom? Mishkachas, I'll give you a case where there is pigul and a machshavas chutz lizmano is mafagel the olas ha'of. Kigon Diomar, he makes a declaration already. Molka manaslo ridol hamachal halosol laktir. He says, my intention is to remove the oaf from the mizbeach and to burn it tomorrow by taking it back up on top. Now, if we're assuming that avir mizbeach ki mizbeach domi, just 1 second. So again, Rava bar Rav Chanan wanted to draw the conclusion that Aver kimizbech lav kimizbech domi. Now the Gemara is saying, according to Rav Shimi, En achinami Aver kimizbech is kimizbech domi. Then you'll ask me the question, so where's the possibility of a machshavas pigul? The answer is because he had a machshava to take it down after dawn the next day, and then to bring it back up on the mizbeach and burn it, which he can't do because halacha is im yardu lo yalu, and therefore the machshava is a machshava haposels, meaning a machshava of pigul. Rava, we said, we finally came to the conclusion, holds that even if the Avarim were remained overnight on the top of the Mizbeach, nevertheless there is a psulina. So then it makes sense to say that you can't burn the Avarim if they were taken down from the Mizbeach after sunrise, because im yardu lo yalu, and therefore the machshavas pigul is a machshavas pigul. El l'rabba di omar ein lina molas b'rashem mizbeach less a machshavta is machshav is meaningless. Why? Because if we're assuming that avir hamizbeach kimizbeach, and therefore when he did the malika, it was already on the mizbeach, and if it's on the mizbeach, even though he had a machshava poseles, nevertheless, in alu lo yerdu, we don't take it down from the mizbeach. So what kind of machshava is it that he has in mind that tomorrow he's going to take it down from the mizbeach? That would not be a valid, so to speak, machshavas pigul, because even if it was taken down from the mizbeach, nevertheless, it would be brought up on top of the mizbeach because there was no psulina. Because there's no psulina and a malika of an olas ha'of that's done in the avr of the mizbeach, because ein lina mo'eles b'rosh hamizbeach. So there's no psulina. If there's no psulina, he's going to have to burn it the next day, even if he takes it down from the mizbeach. Because there's no psulina. And the Gemara says, even according to a rabbi, could come up with a scenario in which there would be a machshava haposeles of pigul. Kegod. What's the case? The Omar, he declares, Hareini molka almenas lohorida kodem amud shachar. I'm going to do the malika, but I'm going to take it down from the mizbeach before amud shachar, and then there would be a psul of lina. And la loso liachar amud shachar. Once the psul of lina will be chal because he'll take it down from the mizbeach before amud shachar, then the halacha is im yardu lo yalu. He can't bring it back up after amud shachar because it was taken down for the mizbeach, and therefore his machshava of chutz l'zmano generates a psul of pigul. Now, at this point, the Gemara rejected Rabbi Bar Achana's proof that the aver the mizbeach is like the mizbeach. And now the Gemara wants to go to the other extreme and to offer a proof that, on the contrary, the aver the mizbeach is like the mizbeach. Meaning, we rejected Rabbi Bar Achana, who says that the aver the mizbeach is not like the mizbeach, but now the Gemara wants to bring a proof that, on the contrary, the aver the mizbeach is k'mizbeach. Lahach gisa miyativsho. To the other side of the equation, I'll bring a raya that mizbeach k'mizbeach. Why? To isal kedaitach aver mizbeach lav k'mizbeach domi. Chatos ha'of psula hechi maza midama. How can he do a hazah on a chatos ha'of psula? Havi leyorut. He says here the Kohen has to lift the oaf off of the Mizbeach in order to do a Zrikas Hadam. How's he going to do a Zrikas Hadam without removing it from the Mizbeach? Now, if he removes it from the Mizbeach, then it's not Royal Hazah. You can no longer sprinkle it. So how could you have a Chatas Ha'of that's Psula and he does Hazah? And Shar Psulim Hechi Zark Lumidama. And when it says the Maga Lahu. Okay, this I think we'll pick up tomorrow. Okay, then. So let me again wish you a great day, and back slowly but surely back to the Telem, back to the way.